Hi, I'm Hayley Jones. Welcome to my channel. Please consider subscribing if you're interested in ideas around the afterlife, what happens when we die, and related topics like reincarnation and mediumship. So, on to today's topic. I'm going to talk about some of the experiences I've had in my life that I believe are evidence, sometimes of the afterlife, but at least for more going on than just our 3D view of things. I was very lucky, and I grew up in an open-minded household where there were books on the shelves on topics like near-death experiences, astral travel, the astral plane, and the afterlife and reincarnation. And on top of that, my maternal grandmother was a psychic. She read cards, annotated playing cards mostly. I know she read tarot cards because I was given her back when she passed, but I never actually saw her use those. She also did psychometry, which is when you hold an item of jewellery or something similar that a person has owned for a reasonable amount of time, say 6 months, and you pick up on the energies around that person and possibly get messages for them as well. I also remember as a kid there being a Ouija board on occasion when my grandmother visited. I don't remember any actual sessions with it. Perhaps they sort of hid us kids from that. But yeah, I do remember that it was there, it was around. We probably, played games with it occasionally, and it was openly spoken about. And I also remember my grandmother speaking about my mum's cousin running seances. So there was stuff going on in that family that was all about this. So we weren't forced into reading any of these books or following in my grandmother's footsteps, but all of these ideas and topics always really fascinated me. We also had books on UFOs, which also fascinated me, but that's a topic slightly different from what this channel is about. So, maybe another time, we'll see. So I know that not everyone has had this kind of upbringing. Obviously, many people are brought up in quite religious households where ideas like reincarnation are not always accepted, depending on the religion, of course. And others are brought up in households which possibly could describe themselves as, science is king, and contemplating anything that you can't lay your eyes or your hands on is frowned upon. If you've had a chance to read my channel description, you will have seen that I have a background in engineering and science, including being in research for close to 20 years. So I know what a proof looks like. I also know what compelling evidence looks like. So while I can't prove to you that the afterlife exists, or that our consciousness continues after we pass, I think that the evidence is overwhelmingly compelling. I'd like to give you a few examples from my own life here, and I'll give some more in other videos as well, but I'll just start with a few for today. So my grandmother lived in a different state from us when I was growing up. Whenever she visited, which I guess was about once a year, she would always read my dad's cards. And as I got older, I would sit next to her and watch what she did and listen to what she said, because I was really interested in learning. So there was one time when I was 13 and she had come to visit, and she told my dad in his card reading that a child he knew would die. She said it wouldn't be one of his children, but it would be a child he knew, and that it would be upsetting, that he would be upset by this. On that occasion, she also read my cards. She didn't. I think that might have been the first time she did that, because she generally said for children under 16, any reading would be more related to your parents and what's going on in their lives than for you. So she generally didn't do it. But I think because I was so interested and keen, she was happy to, just show me how it worked and do one for me. So she told me that I was going to lose a friend. Now, I suspect that at the time she knew that it was related to what she'd said to my dad, but she tried to soften it for me and said something like, oh, it's probably just one of those silly arguments girls your age have. And I was actually quite upset by that, because I didn't feel I was that kind of girl at 13. I didn't have lots of silly arguments with people and so on. I was much more sort of studious and serious. So I was a little bit miffed at that, but I believed her. She obviously did a good job. I believe that that's where she was coming from. I thought it was a bit odd that that's what it would be, but I believed that it was just sort of a silly little incident. Anyway, within a month of her leaving, we received a letter from a good family friend to let us know that her daughter, my friend, who was only a few months older than me, had been killed in a car accident. And this had happened just a week or two after the readings that my grandmother had done for my father and me. So there are two things in this example that are compelling for me. The first is that she saw the same thing in both of our readings. And the second is that it came to pass so soon after those readings. So those of you who know anything about card reading know that it takes some insight and intuition and feel for the cards to be able to read them. It's generally not at all obvious to a disinterested bystander what story the cards might be telling. You can't just sort of pick them up and just make a story. Well, you could make a story, but your accuracy would be questionable. To be good at it, you do need to practice, you do need to have the skill, and you need to have that feel for the cards. So this example, as upsetting as it was a very long time ago now, but it was a compelling illustration for me that there is more to the world and the universe than our 3D senses tell us. So apart from my grandmother, I have visited several psychics in my life. I freely acknowledge that they have been very hit and miss, even those who have had very positive testimonials and recommendations. And a couple have definitely been charlatans, but we don't need to talk more about that. Look, I would also say that in any profession, you're going to have people who are really good and really skilled, and you're going to have people who don't really know what they're doing. It's just the way of the world. So the thing is, though, even in a good reading, it's highly unlikely to be 100% spot on. It's just not going to happen. And the thing is, the messages have to be filtered through another person's brain, which means they're tainted by that person's experience and knowledge and prejudices. So they have to make sense of whatever messages they're getting in however way or whatever way they're getting those messages, whether it's they'll generally get a mix of feelings, of pictures, maybe some words, and they have to put them or pull them together to make sense, not only to them but to you, because they might have different interpretations of things from what the message was meant to be for you as well. So in one reading I had, the psychic medium claimed that she was bringing through my grandmother, my psychic grandmother, and I must admit I wasn't terribly impressed with this part of the reading at the time, because she described my grandmother as being a sweet, gentle, I can't remember if she said size, but a gentle kind of old lady. Like, I felt like she was really relying on the stereotypical sweet grandma stereotype. But my grandmother wasn't like that. I loved her. I loved her, but she just wasn't like that. She was quite tall. She was quite a big woman, and she was a big personality. Sweet is not the first word that you would think of with my grandmother. She was lovely and loving, but she wasn't, sweet. So she was the kind of person you knew she was in the house or in the room. Subtlety was not her thing. She was often in theatre groups and so on. She liked the drama and so on. So it wasn't a good description of her, and I was quite disappointed, and I probably was a bit defensive as well. Anyway, so this poor psychic medium, she continued anyway with the messages that she was getting, because that's all she could do. And she then started saying that my grandmother was showing her tea sets, implying that someone in the family had one or more of her tea sets that that had belonged to her, and that she was also showing her pearls because somebody also had those. Now, my grandmother, in the last years of her life, maybe the last 10-15 years or so, was effectively homeless. I didn't realize at the time, but later, when I became an adult and sort of reflected on it, I thought, oh yeah, she was actually homeless. And she used to go from sort of friend to friend, and she would live in people's spare rooms and so on. So she was not well off. She didn't collect tea sets. She couldn't, I think most of her things were in a suitcase, so she didn't have tea sets. She certainly couldn't afford pearls. So I was very put off by this time, and really, really quite disappointed. Regardless, I did check with my mum and my sister to see if either of them knew, because the psychic had said some other things in the reading that were quite meaningful to me and that I'd found very helpful. But thought, okay, I'll ask my mum and my sister, maybe I've missed something. No, neither of them knew of anything either. So, okay, that was disappointing, but that's where we were. So a couple of months after the reading, I was visiting my sister, and she was working on a doll's house at the time. She'd had it for a number of years and had collected various pieces of furniture and so on to fill it with. It was a bit of a long, slow work in progress. Anyway, on this particular occasion, she'd got out all the furniture she had for it for her young niece to play with. So after her niece had gone home, my sister was packing the furniture and other pieces away when she passed something over to me, saying, as she sort of shoved it along the carpet and said, "Oh, here's Nanny's tea set." And initially my reaction was, I was really pleased to see this lovely miniature porcelain or china tea set that had sat in my sister's and my bedroom when we were kids. It was, it was beautiful, and beautiful little teapot and teacups, just perfectly shaped. It was a lovely little tea set. But then it hit me. She could have said, "Do you remember this tea set?" Or, "Here's the tea set that was in our room when we were growing up." No. She said, "Here's Nanny's tea set," almost like somebody had put those words in her mouth so that I would click. So I sort of laughingly then pointed at her and said, "Hey, do you have the pearls?" Which she assured me that she didn't. And that made me realise that I had never actually checked my jewelry box. So I have a jewelry box, but it's mostly got stuff from when I was a child or a teenager. It was actually sitting in the top of a cupboard at the time. I really didn't use it. And that's probably why I didn't bother checking it, but I just didn't remember any pearls. But of course, when I got home, I went and got down the jewelry box, and just before I opened it, I did try to visualize, think, okay, if I've seen these before, what do they look like? And it came to me that they were double strand with a fancy clasp. And when I opened the jewelry box, of course, there they were. Now, two things with that. One, they're not real pearls. As I said, my grandmother was not well off. Also, I'm not claiming that this is a psychic thing. That was clearly my memory coming, because obviously I'd seen them before. They were in my jewelry box, but I just hadn't seen them for a long time. And I just felt, for myself, I wanted to see if I could remember what they looked like. So again, look, this story would not convince a skeptic, but for me it was just another little notch of evidence. It was just really nice the way, though, that sort of played out afterwards. So I did actually then write back to the psychic and let her know what had happened and say, "Hey, look, this is what you said. I wasn't happy at the time, but here's what's happened since." So that was all good. So my final story, many years ago, I was in a relationship that I really wasn't happy in, but I somehow found it very difficult to put an end to. I finally got to a point at around the 5-year mark where I was ready to leave. And on the night I decided I was going to do it, I had visited my sister for moral support and to help, muster up the courage. So I drove home still feeling hesitant. Anyone who's ever been in a long-term relationship will know that it can be a really, really difficult thing to do, to call it off. There's a lot of connection there, even if you feel like you don't want to be in the relationship anymore, and you're going to hurt another person, and it's not a nice thing to do, no matter how sure you are that you need to be out of that relationship. So I also knew that I would get some pushback from this man, and I needed to steel myself against that as well, because I did tend to be easily led in some ways. So this was a Saturday night, and on Saturday nights at that time, one of the local radio stations played hits from the 70s and 80s, sometimes the 60s, not very often, and I was listening to this radio show on my way home. So when I was about 3 kilometres from home, which is not that far, in desperation, I kind of said out loud, kind of putting it out there to the universe, as it were, whatever song is on the radio when I pull into the driveway is going to give me an indication of what I should do, call it off or not. Now, I just want to put out there that obviously this wasn't going to, sway my decision. It was just something I thought of in the spur of the moment, and I thought, well, look, if it works, it might just give me a bit of a boost, and just make me feel a little bit better about it. So anyway, as I pulled into the driveway, the song on the radio was "See You Later, Alligator." That was enough for me, and just gave me a boost of confidence that I needed to just feel a bit better about facing the pushback that I was almost certain to get. Now, if the song had been something like "Let's Stay Together," I really don't think that would have changed my mind or changed what I did. But just having, "See you later, alligator," help me give me that boost. However, there is a little bit more to this story. What didn't occur to me at the time, and I only realised sometime later when I was relaying the story to somebody else, was that the band performing the song was Bill Haley and the Comets. And I don't know if you've heard of Bill Haley or not. I believe he was around in the 50s and 60s, maybe early 70s. But his surname is spelt the same way as my given name. And that kind of blew me away. So not only was the message, for goodness sake, get out of there, but my name was incorporated into, the song through the artist. And kind of made me realize, look, how much stronger a message could I have been given. So that was quite fun when I found that out. So anyway, I'm guessing if you're here that it's highly likely that you've had some similar experiences yourself, either with psychics or mediums, or just messages or intuitive experiences that you've had for yourself. I would love to read them if you'd like to share them. If you have, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.